So a neighbor knocks on a door in a Duisburg apartment block. He's annoyed. The shared toilet pipe is blocked. He figures someone clogged it and he wants to know what the problem is. He knocks. A quiet little man opens the door. Shy, unremarkable, the kind of person you forget 5 minutes after meeting him. The neighbor asks, "Do you know what's blocking the pipe?" The man thinks about it for a second and says, "Guts." The neighbor looks down and sees pieces of a small child stuffed into the drain. That one word, guts, ended a 21-year killing spree that police had absolutely no idea was happening. This is the story of Joachim Kroll. So let me tell you who this guy actually was before we get into any of it. Joachim Kroll was born in 1933 in a small German town in what's now Poland. He was the 6th of 9 kids. His dad was a coal miner who got taken as a prisoner of war when Joachim was still a child, so he basically grew up without a father during the most chaotic period in European history. After the war, the whole family got uprooted. Germany lost those eastern territories. Millions of Germans were expelled westward, and the Kroll family ended up in the industrial Ruhr Valley. This massive, grey, smoky stretch of West Germany full of steel plants and coal yards and cramped apartment blocks. Joachim didn't do well in school. He only made it through 3 grades. His IQ was later tested at 76, which puts him in borderline disability territory. He was small, sickly. He wet the bed well into childhood, which got him bullied. He had no real friends. He watched his family kill pigs as a kid, and something about the blood stuck with him in a way it shouldn't have. He grew up into a shy, soft-spoken man who nobody paid much attention to, which is exactly what made him dangerous. He got a job as a toilet attendant, a janitor basically for big steel companies in Duisburg. He lived alone in a tiny 3-room apartment. He had a rubber sex doll. He had children's toys and candy on his shelves. And the kids in the neighborhood called him Uncle Joachim. He was that guy. The slightly slow, harmless bachelor on the 3rd floor who gave the children sweets and seemed to genuinely like having them around. Parents weren't worried. They figured he was just lonely, wanted a family of his own. Not one person in that neighborhood suspected him of anything. His mother died in 1955. He was 21 years old, and within weeks of her death, he killed for the first time. Her name was Irmgard Strell. She was 19 years old. He lured her to a barn near the village of Wallstedt, stabbed her in the neck, strangled her, and then completely gutted her with a butcher's knife. And then he went home. Now here's the thing you need to understand about how Joachim Kroll operated, because this is what kept him free for 2 decades. He never killed in the same place twice in a short span. He spread his murders across the entire Ruhr region, different towns, different police departments, different jurisdictions. Ludinghausen, Bottrop, Essen, Dinslaken, Wuppertal, Marl, Duisburg, each one handled by different investigators who had no reason to connect anything. He traveled by public bus, no car, just a quiet little man riding public transit across the industrial heartland of West Germany to find his next victim. He hunted in parks, meadows, riverbanks, quiet paths where people walked alone. He didn't have a specific type. His victims ranged from a 4-year-old girl to a 61-year-old woman. The only thing they had in common was that they were alone. He'd approach, strangle quickly, and then after, he'd take parts of the body home. to eat. He said he did it to save on grocery bills. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, because the reality of it is the whole story. He would cut portions of flesh, usually from the thighs or the buttocks, take them home, cook them on his stove, and eat them. Like a meal, like any other dinner. When police eventually found his apartment, his fridge had human flesh stored alongside normal food. There was a child's hand simmering in a pot on the stove. He saw nothing extraordinary about this. As far as he was concerned, he was just being practical. And now here is the part of this story that doesn't get enough attention, because this is where it goes from disturbing to genuinely catastrophic. While Joachim Kroll was riding buses across the Ruhr, killing people, storing flesh in his refrigerator, and going to work the next morning, 6 other men were being arrested, investigated, convicted, and destroyed for the murders he was committing. 6 men. Let me go through them one by one, because I think each one deserves to be said out loud. The first was a mechanic named Heinrich Ott. In 1959, a 24-year-old woman named Clara Frieda Tesmer was found raped and strangled near the Rhine River. Police arrested Ott. He said he didn't do it. He couldn't prove he didn't do it. He sat in jail. He couldn't get out, and at some point, unable to clear himself and unable to see a way forward, Heinrich Ott hanged himself in his cell. He died in jail for a murder Kroll committed. The second was an unnamed man who ended up confessing, likely under pressure, to the 1959 murder of 16-year-old Manuela Cannot. He was convicted and sentenced to 8 years in prison. He served 5 of them. 5 years of his life gone for something he didn't do. The third was a man named Vincenz Kuhn. He was formally convicted of raping and murdering 13-year-old Petra Gies in 1962. He went to prison. He served time as a convicted child murderer, while Kroll was at work at the steel plant. The fourth was a man named Walter Quicker. He was arrested in June 1962 for the murder of 12-year-old Monica Taffel. Police couldn't charge him, not enough evidence, so they let him go. But in a small working-class Ruhr town, getting arrested for killing a child is a permanent mark. Neighbors knew. People whispered. People crossed the street. Within 4 months of his release, by October 1962, Walter Kricker was dead by his own hand. He was never convicted, never imprisoned, and Kroll's murder still killed him. The fifth was a man named Adolf Schickel. In 1966, a 20-year-old woman named Ursula Rohling was found strangled in a park. Police did what they always do. They looked at the boyfriend first. Adolf Schickel was interrogated, suspected, accused. He couldn't make it stop. He took his own life. The sixth was a man named Peter Shea. He was arrested in 1970 for the strangulation of 13-year-old Jutta Rahn. Released, not enough to charge him, but he lived in his neighborhood for the next 6 years, with everyone convinced he was a child killer. By 1976, the year Kroll was finally caught, the harassment had become unbearable. Peter Shea broke. He confessed to murdering Jutta Rahn. He hadn't done it. He confessed to a murder he didn't commit because the pressure of being accused had ground him down to nothing. So that's the full count. 2 men dead by suicide. 1 man imprisoned for 5 years on a false confession. 1 man formally convicted and imprisoned. 1 man hounded into a false confession. 1 more living for years under formal accusation. And Joachim Kroll continued, working his job, collecting toys, giving candy to the children on his floor. You might be wondering how this was even possible. 21 years, multiple police forces, multiple cases. Part of it was the geography. He spread the murders so deliberately across so many different towns that no single investigative team was ever looking at the full picture. Part of it was timing. He sometimes went years between killings, which meant any pattern that might have emerged just dissolved. Part of it was that other killers were active in the same region at the same time. The Ruhr Valley in the 1950s and 60s was not a peaceful place. When a body turned up, there were always other suspects to consider. And part of it, honestly, the biggest part, was that when police found suspects, they stopped looking. They found their man, the pressure to close the case went away, and Kroll quietly moved on. The system was designed to find an answer, not necessarily the right one. There's no central piece of the story where someone nearly caught him, no close call that he narrowly escaped. He simply wasn't on anyone's radar. He was Uncle Joachim, the quiet man with the toys. July 3rd, 1976, Duisburg-La. 4-year-old Marion Ketter went to the playground near her apartment building. She didn't come home. Her parents looked for her. Neighbors looked for her. Police were called and started going door to door through the building. Marion was 4 years old. She had been to that playground 100 times. It was right there. While police were canvassing the building, a neighbor, some accounts give his name as Oscar Müller, noticed that the shared waste pipe for the toilets was completely blocked. He figured someone had clogged it. He knocked on Kroll's door. He asked, "Do you know what's blocking the pipe?" Kroll thought about it and said, "Guts." The neighbor looked into the toilet. He saw what he could only describe as small human organs stuffed into the drain. He went directly to the police. They went to Kroll's apartment, and they found Marion. Her hand was in a pot of boiling water on the stove. Other parts of her body were in the refrigerator. Her entrails were what had blocked the pipe. She was 4 years old, and Kroll had killed her that afternoon, within walking distance of his front door. Kroll was in the apartment when police arrived. He didn't run, he didn't fight. He answered the door the way he always answered doors, calmly, cooperatively, like a man with nothing on his mind. He was arrested on the spot and taken in for questioning. And then he started talking. He told them about Marion Ketter. He described exactly what he'd done. And then, without being pushed much, he started describing 13 more murders, going back 21 years. Cold cases across the Ruhr. Bodies police had filed away and closed. He walked them through all of it. When, where, how. His demeanor during this was what investigators found hardest to process. He wasn't proud. He wasn't remorseful. He wasn't dramatic. He was just explaining things, like someone going through a list at work, matter of fact, calm, helpful. And here's the part that really gets under your skin. Throughout all of it, the confessions, the descriptions, the details, Kroll genuinely believed that what was going to happen next was that doctors would perform a small operation to fix his urges, and then he'd go home. He thought it was a medical problem, something they could cut out, and once they did, everything would be fine and he could go back to his apartment. He cooperated so fully, so eagerly, because he thought he was helping the process along. He wanted to get to the part where they fixed him. He had no idea he was never going home. The trial started in 1981, It ran for 151 days, at the time one of the longest trials in West German history. He was convicted of 8 murders and 1 attempted murder. Not all 14 confessed killings, because for some of them, like the girl whose body was never found, there wasn't enough physical evidence left to convict on. 8 murders, 1 attempted murder, life in prison. West Germany had abolished the death penalty in 1949. So that was that. Psychiatric experts assessed him throughout. His IQ of 76, his stunted development, his apparent inability to understand why what he had done was monstrous. All of it was put in front of the court. They found him legally responsible anyway. He knew what he was doing. He had hidden it for 21 years. That's not a man who doesn't understand consequences. He spent 9 years in Rheinbach prison. On July 1st, 1991, he died of a heart attack. He was 58 years old. 2 days later would have been the 15th anniversary of his arrest. So let me just put this all together. Joachim Kroll killed for 21 years. At least 14 people, possibly more, whose bodies were never found or whose cases were never officially linked to him. Children, teenagers, young women, a middle-aged woman, a 4-year-old. While he was doing it, 2 innocent men died. 1 in jail, 1 from the harassment of being accused. At least 2 more men lost years of their lives to imprisonment or false conviction. 1 man was broken down into confessing to a murder he didn't commit. And the whole time, Kroll was on the bus, working his job, going home, being harmless old Uncle Joachim. There's a version of this story where you feel horror at what he did, and that's obviously there. But the part that I keep coming back to is the other men, the ones who never killed anyone, the ones who just happened to be in the wrong place when police were looking for someone to blame. Walter Quicker, dead in October 1962, 4 months after being released. Never convicted, just accused. That was enough. And Kroll ate his dinner. There's a question underneath all of this that doesn't really have a clean answer. How do you build a system that catches people like him, that doesn't destroy people like them along the way? West Germany eventually reformed its investigative systems after this case, created more centralized databases, better cross-jurisdictional cooperation. Too late for the 6 men. Too late for the 14 victims. But maybe not too late for whoever would have come next. Joachim Kroll died in 1991 in a prison cell. 68 years old, polite to the end, genuinely confused for most of his life about why the people around him were upset. He thought they'd fix him and let him go home. They didn't. His victims are buried. The men wrongly accused are either dead or old now. The cases are closed. And somewhere in the Ruhr Valley, there's still a playground where a 4-year-old girl went in the summer of 1976 and never came back. That's the one that doesn't leave you. I'm the Archives. New story every week. See you next time.